Are you wondering what the direct outs on your Mimic can do for you? Are you confused? You won't be after this video. Let's get started. Hey guys, Alan from V Expressions here. Today I want to talk about the Mimic's direct outs, main outs, and actually just all outputs. I'm going to do a little explanation of what they offer to you, and maybe through all the little examples I show you, you can come up with how they will benefit you in your situation. Before I begin, I want to have a little shout out for all our Roland family. We have not forgotten you. As a matter of fact, we have a TD17 pack on the way. Should be out in the next 2 to 3 weeks maximum, I think. TD25 pack will come out with it or slightly after it. Both those are in testing at the moment, and pending the final test and the final file, I will be putting the stuff together for the website. Takes me usually about a week to do that, and then that will be coming out. After that, not after that, actually during all that, Chris and I will also be beginning development on the TD50 again. He's going to be doing, if I remember correctly, an acoustic pack in his style that a lot of you guys love from the 30 and 20 and 20X. And I will be doing a artist slash studio pack for the 50 in my style. A lot of you guys are asking for artist kits. I think the 50 is a little limited in doing top 50 drummers or top 100 drummers. So I'm going to try to do 25 and see how that turns out. And if it works out great, then I'll do another pack exactly the same with artist and studio kits. Again, I always like to do studio and artist kits around the same time together because they seem to complement each other. And a lot of people like picking up all of that at the same time. So I'm going to do it that way. I'm going to split them up, but put them together, if that makes sense. So let's move on. I will be also doing a Mimic pack, a third one, which I'm already started on, probably about 15%, 20% into it. But I'm going to take a lot longer to do this one. Probably not going to put this one out till after Halloween. The 250 packs Chris and I are going to work on. Hopefully we'll have them out in October. Hopefully early October, but I'm thinking mid-late October, something like that. That sounds like a long way away, but it really isn't. It's only a couple months. We don't like to rush things. So we like to make sure that they're what you guys want. And then the Mimic pack that I'm going to do, and Chris will be working on a Mimic pack too later. Mimic pack that I'm going to do is probably going to be out for Christmas. I think his is going to be out sometime around the spring because Chris gets busy gigging in the fall. Enough about that. Let's move on to our topic today, which is about the direct outs, the outputs of your Mimic Pro, and all the things that they offer you. Like I said, I hope I give you some examples that will help you and give you ideas of how you can use them to your benefit. So the first thing I want to start with is talking about the foundation of recording drums. Up here at the top, you'll see I have 6 or 7 folders, whatever it is. I'm going to open this one, Studio, and we're going to look at these channels down here. Matter of fact, I'll hide all these for the moment. I did not mean to do that. This is going to be a foundational setup to show you how drums are recorded in a studio, or how they're mic'd in multiple situations. A lot of you guys are going to know this, but some people that are new to drumming might not, so I wanted to add this in here. So basically, you're looking at 14 channels of direct out from my Mimic that is mimicking an acoustic kit. This is going to be my studio mix folder, and then we will get into all the other topic of this discussion in a little bit. I want you to have a good foundation. In a studio, you'll see here I have 14 channels. I got kick in, kick out, snare top, snare bottom, hi-hat, and ride. All these things are panned appropriately, of course. Tom 1, 2, 3, and 4. Again, panned, overhead left and right, panned right and left. Room right and left. And all panned accordingly because these were all brought in from the direct out. You can ignore these next 3 channels, but this one is the bus for the drum tracks here. So, in a studio recording, you usually have your tracks, 14 for this example, and then you'll have a bus for that. And the bus will carry some effects. In Mimic speak, that's your kit effects. That's where the final send signal goes to your master, which I have here on the right in red. So you have these 14 channels. In your Mimic, you've already seen that they all carry on the mic effects tab, they carry a compressor and an EQ. that's very studio standard. If you'll see here, I've also done the same thing. I have compressors on all those channels, except for these two. And then I have EQs on all these channels, and these are multi-band. And then in my bus for this, all I have is a mix tool, which is actually just for some volume tweaks for today for you guys. But I do have a mastering plugin I put here, but I'm not going to run this today. So I want to stop for a moment, and I want to tell you guys, if you hear some clicks and pops and crackles, I'm very sorry. This is the first time that I'm recording a DAW with a screencast. And if you've never done this before, you wouldn't know, but that's nearly impossible because your DAW locks everything up. Anytime you try to use another app, it won't let you. It's the ASO thing. So I have to run a virtual piece of software in the background, and I struggled for the past day trying to get settings that would make that thing work great. But for some reason, my system is just not wanting to be friendly with that piece of software, and it's about the only software out there to do this with. I'm not on an Apple or a Mac, so I don't have screencast to make this all nice and simple. However, so if you hear some pops and crackles, I apologize. It's not in the recordings. It's this software that I'm running. So I think I've covered this. Just quickly to touch on it again, I have 14 channels here. They have the compressor and EQ just like in your Mimic, and that all goes to a bus, which is acting as my kit effects here, and that's all going to my master out. It's exactly the same in your Mimic. This is how studio works. This is how live gigging works for the big boys. Maybe not for some of us small boys, but it works for the big Def Leppards and all those guys. They do it all the exact same way. Recording in the studio, that's how it's done. So I'm going to go ahead and actually close this folder and go up here and turn all this on and tell you what we're looking at. Our top track here, called MIDI, obviously, is a 8-bar MIDI loop that I played and just recorded the MIDI performance. The reason I did this is I wanted to use the exact same performance to record all these different examples for you to show you all the different things that you're going to, or the differences you'll hear in according to what you choose in your module and how you output it. So we're not going to use that MIDI today. My module's actually off, so we're going to turn that off. So our first track here is the internal. The internal comes from me sending the MIDI back to the module, recording it in the module, sending it to the USB, bringing it here, and sticking it in the DAW. I will tell you that version 108 in the Mimic does now automatically normalize on save. So when you do that, now you won't have to come to your video editor and normalize it to put it up on YouTube. It'll already be done for you. That saves you quite a few steps, actually. So we're going to solo the internal recording here and have a peek to what it sounded like. Again, crackling. Sorry, I've got some notices popping up here. If there's crackling, I apologize. Let's take a listen. So you get the idea. This is a very basic kit that I created. Actually, what I did was for bass drum layer 1, that's going to be my kick in. It's literally just the kick in mic. Now the overheads and room mics are still set to default. That's 0.8. Those are sending out to overhead and room channels. So that's not going to be in the direct out for the bass drum layer 1. Bass drum layer 2 is my kick out. So it's only the kick out mic. The in is off. Again, the overhead and room are default, and this goes across the entire pack. Toms is just one mic, and then your overhead and room. So you obviously get the point. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. What I have to say about the internal. Let me bring up the inspector here just to show you. I have the internal normalized, but I don't really need to because it doesn't change it. However, I will say that on the main out, I have that normalized because when I record it, I recorded a lot lower. Let me zoom in here so you can see how small that is. If I turn on normalize, Studio One will automatically normalize it for me upon playback and viewing, for that matter. So that's because I'm recording it into my interface, and I'm bringing that level down a lot so that I can keep it under control. In a studio, you like to record at usually minus 18 to minus 14, maybe somewhere in there. I did all this at around minus 14 max. It's closer to 15, 16. The reason for that is you try to leave 6 dB for mixing and 6 dB for mastering. When you send off a recording to a master, you want to send it to them at usually around minus 6, maybe minus 4 at the max. You want to give them some room to work. So that's why this is unnormalized. It is very low. It's actually at minus 15 or 16. So I'm normalizing this for your benefit of hearing it. Let me close the inspector and let's shrink this back down and let's take a listen. I'm going to A-B it. So it's virtually the same. And that's the way it should be, because I'm sending the same signal, same mix, same everything to my master as I am my phones. So those are identical. And what I hear in my phones is what I get in the recorder. What I hear in my phones is what's going out the master, because I have those matched. It's what's going through your headphone mix. So speaking of headphones and mains, we're going to go to what's in Update 108, a new feature where you can actually redirect your headphone mix to the masters so that you only have to deal with one master. One mixer. This can be helpful in some situations, especially like if you're at rehearsal with your band and you're just sending, you want to listen to one thing and send one thing out to some PA for them to hear you. That would be one example. Obviously, doing YouTube videos is a perfect example, because then you're only dealing with one thing. What you hear at your module is what you want to hear when you get it to the computer in your video that you're going to upload on YouTube. That's a perfect example for that. Let's solo that, take a listen. I think you can guess what it's going to sound like. And I think that's enough. I think you get the point. The point is that I've taken that headphones that you heard in internal recording track 1 and track 2, I'm sorry, MIDI's hidden. That is the same thing as this. These two are identical. 2 different recordings, 2 different places, sound exactly the same. Headphones to main, once again, I'll show you with the inspector on the headphone to main capture that I did. I am normalizing it because, once again, I grabbed it a little bit lower. It's not quite as low as the other one was, the main out. That one was a lot lower. I had this one a little hotter. And I will tell you now, the reason it was hotter is because I'm controlling extra volume on the home page through, I didn't use music, but that would be your auxiliary in as well, and the slider at the top for your overall volume. As well, you now have a 6 dB boost for your headphones that's in the headphone setup, available to those of you who have headphones that are a little quieter. I think the 6 dB boost is also playing into this. It most likely is. I haven't tested that, but that's where the extra volume is coming in. So I'm going to go ahead and normalize that back. It's only making like a 2 dB difference. We'll mute that. We'll close the inspector, and then we will move on. Our next folder here is with EQ and comp. So real quickly, I want to let you listen to what we've already done. I'm going to go ahead and close my headphone and my internal. We're just going to use our main here for our comparison. Our main file here, let's listen to it one time. And what you're about to hear it compare to is just direct outs. As you can see here on the screen, I have 14 channels in the next folder that are not on yet. They're direct outs, but they are carrying EQ and comp that is on the mic effects tab. Let's take a listen to the main out first for comparison, and then I will A/B it to the EQ and comp only, where you lose your kit effects. I'll speak about the kit effects in just a second. Let's listen. So it loses a lot of life. And what it's losing is that final bus, which is your kit effects in the Mimic. The kit effects is just like the bus I showed you at the beginning of the video in your foundation. It's the bus for all your drums together. You can't get that kit effects unless you're taking all those channels and feeding it into that one so you can get that effect. If you do that, there's no way to get just that effect without all those channels going through it. This is why you cannot get the kit effects out separately. You can only do it through the main out. You can only do it through an overall mix, a stereo mix, whether it be internally, the main out, or what have you. So you can send directs with your overhead and rooms and reverb, which I didn't add a lot of reverb for this example, but you just listen to that. You had overheads and rooms, and it doesn't matter. That extra level of comp and EQ it's almost like the mastering bus for the drums. Basically, it is. So one more time, we'll take a listen, do the exact same thing. We'll listen to the main first, and then I'll A/B over to the other one. Actually, we'll do this one backwards so that you can hear the beginning, vice versa. So you lose that final mastered sound that you've added in your kit effects. So while we're looking at that, people might say, well, why would I do that at all? Well, there are people who have written me who send out their main out left and right, but they'll flavor in some extra punch by sending out just their bass drums. Maybe they'll combine them. You can combine in your routing your layer 1 and layer 2 into one out, like out 3, and send that, and then do the same thing with your snares into number 4, or layer 1 and 2 together into output 4. Run those to your front of house if you're gigging, and you can flavor in more punch and power if you need it. And I have heard of guys doing that. Actually, I think there's a lot of guys doing that, because I've gotten a few emails with that example being asked, can I do that? Absolutely. Now, while we're still in this folder with EQ and comp, I'm going to slide down here to the end where you'll see I have a FX channel called Kit Effects, and the EQ and comp bus is right here next to it. What I'm going to do is play this again. I better solo it. And I am going to turn on this send right here that is going to send to this channel. So what I am doing is I am replicating my kit effects at the DAW. This would be the same thing your engineer would do live. So let's take a listen. First, you're going to hear it just the direct outs with EQ and comp at the module, and then you're going to hear me kick in the kit effects. It'll be subtle. A little subtle. So it brings it back to almost the same as your main. We'll take a listen to that real quick. So it's definitely a different mix, because now I'm doing it in the DAW and I'm getting a wider spectrum. If you listen to what we're adding in the DAW, wider. You can hear the room. You can hear a lot more of the environment, which is probably a good representation of live gigging, because your environment's going to add that. So let's go ahead and close that. We are done with this, and we will mute that, and we are done with our without. We are now going to go to our, we're now going to go to our without and solo that. This is without the EQ and comp that is in the module. Let's take a listen. Let me start at the beginning. So you can already hear it's just the raw drum sound. You've lost that EQ cut. You've lost that compression that's pumping everything up a little bit more. The grace notes in the snare, they're there, but they're not as detailed and refined and punched out a little bit as they were with the comp and EQ. Barely can hear them. And you can hear how much more raw the toms are as well. I just noticed I never panned those, so sorry about that. Um, and the reason I thought of that is because you're about to hear a really wide tom spectrum. So that's how your direct outs will sound when you turn off your EQ and comp. So you lost your kit effects. That's your basically your drum master bus. And then you lost your, because we turned them off. We didn't lose them. We turned them off, the EQ and the comp on each mic effects tab. So you get a raw drum. Now, why would you want to do that? A lot of people wouldn't want to do that. I'll tell you why you want to do that, and it's in this next folder. Let's go ahead and mute that, close that. I'm going to go ahead and close this, and now we're back to the beginning. We're back to our original 14 channels of raw drums recorded just like if we were in a studio. And that's what we're looking at here at the bottom again. Go ahead and solo this. And nothing is on at the moment. I'm going to bring the mix tool up so you guys can hear it. Otherwise, it'll be really quiet because once again, I recorded at minus 16, so somewhere in there. And basically, that drops 10 decibels. A difference of like a decibel to decibel and a half, you won't really notice very much, but a difference of 10 or 12 decibels, you'll definitely not be able to hear it. And I don't want you turning it up. So I'm going to compensate for you here. Let's take a listen to these dry tracks. It'll sound just like the ones before it. You get the point, and you can see how small those waves are. But I did not want to go in here and change the level of these waves for this time because I wanted to do this the way we're going to do this in a studio. So let's go ahead and set this mix tool to mix tool. By the way, this is just gain. I'm going to set it to, I think 8 will be okay while I do this next part, which is I'm going to turn on our compressors. Now we're going to hear adding our compressors in, what that sounds like. Starts to spread things out and give it a little more punch. And I know it's still quiet, sorry about that. Okay, but the reason I did not want to start maxing out the volume is because when I add this EQ, things are going to get punched out. So I'm going to add 4 dB this time. I probably should have went a little higher that last time, but now we're going to put punch in the EQ, and this is where you hear your massive difference. When you're in the studio, usually take it a little further than you do in the module. Let's take a listen. Here comes the EQ. Now you can hear that gut-wrenching bass drum, and you're starting to hear the spectrum of the drum set sound a lot more realistic, a lot more defined, a lot more mixed. Finally, I'm going to add, the kit effects is not applicable to this folder, and these two obviously are buses for the other folders. However, we're working on this one. I'm going to turn on this console just so you can hear a little bit of difference there. I like how it gives it a punch. And it also starts to give you a realistic studio sound. For people that mix in the box, meaning inside a computer, today the standard really is to run a plugin that creates an analog sound at the end. It's called analog summing, by the way. And what they do, some people, analog summing actually means sending it out to something analog and recording it back in. But they make plugins to do the same thing. Obviously, the plugins are not as good as doing the real thing, but that's debatable. So finally, I'm going to add, basically, I have added all my comp and EQ to each channel, which is bringing me pretty close to the kit effects sound. I could do this ozone, which is basically like my mastering plugin. I just threw it on here for an idea. We will listen to that real quick. Might want to turn this off. I'll turn this on and turn the console on. Let's hear how this comes to life. So basically, I took a completely raw kit, meaning the complete raw recordings from the Mimic, put them into my DAW, and completely mixed here for a completely different sound. I've said completely too many times for sure. So that's about it for today. I hope that just going through all these examples showed you all the different things that you can do and maybe give you some ideas that you can now go to your engineer when you're gigging or when you're recording with your band and say, hey, we need to do this or we need to do that or this should help us get a better sound or whatever it is. Hopefully some of the examples give you an idea of how to flavor your live gigging with adding individual tracks here and there just to pump up something when you need it, or just to provide it to your engineer for those moments when your guitarist just decides he wants to play too loud and your engineer says, I need more bass, but you don't want to change it in a module so he can just add it there at the front of house. Things like that. I hope that it's provide you some examples that you're thinking in your head and wheels are turning in your situation that you can benefit from something from maybe one thing from all these folders. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below. I'll be glad to answer them. Come visit us over at vdrums.com. You'll get me over there a lot more often. Just make your thread there or reply in our Vex and Mimic thread in the Vex and Custom Kits forum. It's vdrums.com. Come visit us at vexpressionsltd.com. Check out what we have for the Mimic if you haven't gotten anything from us yet. And very soon you'll see our second pack coming. And if you're a Roland person that's part of our family and you've stuck around through this because you're just curious, but you still have your Roland and you're going to stick with your Roland, come check out and see what we have for you too. Finally, I want to thank you for watching. I hope you got something out of this. I hope you give us a thumbs up and subscribe while you're down there. We will see you again soon. It's been fun. Bye.